So do you have to change that? Do you have to change the varus loading and people have knee OA? So varus would be like that. Does that consistently change when someone's walking and they have knee OA following a rehab program? Nope. And the people get better. Transverse abdominis timing. Does that consistently change and correlate with people getting out of pain? Nope. It's pretty bloody amazing, right? I have a massive field dedicated to this stuff, right? And its relevance to pain is so questionable for so many things. Any examples that you guys want to throw out? And we can all use our brains to look at yes, thank you. Better be. Okay, so all right, let's look. That's a great one. So this is the idea where we can confuse a successful intervention with the mechanism of that intervention. So that's really great. So if you look at that, if someone has patellofemoral pain syndrome, what's the literature right now on proximal loading? What's proximal? That's distal. This is proximal. I know shit, honest. So loading the hip, right? So if we look at the systematic reviews, there's one that just came out in JOPT. There's a paper I can pull it up if you like, by Simon Lack. That's a really good one. And so what Simon and Chris Barton and all that whole group, do you remember what they showed in that? Hip strengthening was helpful for patellofemoral pain syndrome. But which muscle of the hip? What do we hear we have to do? Glute med? What other one? External rotators? The gemelli, right? Your favorite? Gemelli? What else? Glute max? What else? What? Obturators? Sure. Hip flexors? Tim Tyler's research? So the hip flexors. So what do we conclude from that? Any muscle in the hip, any proximal muscle you can train, and it's correlated with improvements in symptoms. What was the theory that training the glute max would do to someone while they're walking or squatting or something like that? What was the idea behind training the glutes? Yeah.
It prevents femoral internal rotation.
That was the theory. Now, what's the research showing that hip strengthening changes lower leg kinematics? Not supported, not consistently. You can look at John Wilson's research and Rich Willey's research. They look at that specifically. You could look at Jen Earle's research and Snyder and Earle if you want the reference for them. That's 2009 if you got your things out there. That hip strengthening doesn't consistently change kinematics, all right? But is it helpful? Yes. So it's not working via the proposed mechanism. And then why were we worried about knee internal rotation to begin with? Or hip internal rotation? What is the theory behind that? Going back to is it plausibly related to pain or associated with pain? What's that? Patellar tracking. So the theory was, and this is a paper by Souza in 2010, if you internally rotate your femur, the patellar will laterally track to the side. That's what laterally means. It's a little redundant. And you will have greater force on the lateral patellar facet. That was the theory. Right? So that's true. That does happen. But interestingly, in the same Souza study, and the concern was then you're going to put more load on the lateral patellar facet, and you're going to have more wear and tear. So the assumption there is that load leads to wear and tear, which is a questionable assumption as well. But what they showed is, standing upright, you had lots of patellar displacement. As you squat to 45 degrees, where the loads increase, the lateral patellar displacement becomes less, and it's almost the same as the people who don't have pain. So when it should be a real problem, the kneecap moves over. And then we would have to look at, all right, what's the relationship between hip internal rotation and future knee pain? We only have one prospective study that I know of. That's by Brian Noren and Irene Davis and that. And there was no difference in hip internal rotation in runners who went on to get knee pain. So it was a prospective one. Right? So it's kind of neat. But clinically, if it hurts to do this, and this feels better, what's one of your options? Do this. Wow. We went through all of that biomechanical research to say, it hurts to do that, don't do it. That's what we go through, like the confusion of biomechanics. We end up going back to really like reasonable things, right? If you want another one on the hip, a really neat paper on the hip internal rotation idea is, it was in the, the kneecap summit that they have, you know, the retreat. I'm not invited, so I don't really care. The patellofemoral research retreat. And it's great that they cited this paper. It's by Gross, and it's called Breaking the Law of Valgus, the surprising and unexplained poor relationship between knee valgus and lateral patellofemoral OA. And what they found was, regardless of your knee-hip position, most people, right, actually all people, had more medial patellar facet OA. Only in the most extreme version did we see a little bit more in the lateral patellar facet. So the argument is, it challenges the wear and tear hypothesis, right? We assume that load is going to lead to wear and tear, which is weird, right? Maybe that's not a factor at all. I mean, the other movement optimistic way, that's the wear and repair, right? Don't call it wear and tear. So does that make sense? Does that answer your question, Kana? Does it mean don't do hip strengthening for people? No. It just means don't vilify, you know, hip adduction. Don't vilify those movement patterns, right? Still train them there. You know, still train the local muscles at the knee, right? So bio is still relevant. You still do these mechanical interventions. You just don't have these fancy explanations, right? So it's cooler. It might work via dynamic coupling. No one's ever tested that. Dynamic coupling is sort of this hypothesis, not hypothesis. It's where like any muscle in the body can accelerate another joint at a distance, even if it doesn't cross it. So it's like how bilateral amputees would stand up, right? Very cool. They have no muscles crossing the knee joint, but they're able to stand up because of the hip extensors. Or if you squat down like this, my soleus can work to get me to stand up, right? I can extend my knee by the soleus contracting. So that's one of the ideas that no one's tested. And so perhaps maybe glute strengthening does something like that. I'd be open to that as well. It might change the stress. Any other ones? See how you can go through that process? Like with any sort of biomechanical idea, you can kind of follow through this. Yeah, Katie?